We went over how to FOIL because many of us forgot, even though it was in Unit 6 and we had like a special lesson for it in Math Lab. Many of us forgot how to multiply like expressions against each other. But you know how to do that. You can't forget to do that. A lot of it contains like the exponent rule. So really it should be really easy because we spent extra time in here going over the exponent rules. But regardless, if you need help with that, you can watch the video from yesterday. It's linked in the slide. If you guys can't stop talking, I'm gonna leave you anywhere near you. All right, so what we noticed yesterday is that in these three problems that we were given, our answers looked kind of similar. All right, normally when we FOIL like a binomial times a binomial, like a 2-term times a 2-term, is what a binomial is. When we multiply them, usually we get 3 terms. But in this one, we got 2 terms. Why did we only have 2 terms? Because in each situation, the middle terms canceled each other. Okay, so that's why we ended up with just 2 terms. And they're especially unique because they're what we call a difference of squares. So in this unit, in algebra and in Math Lab, we're going to kind of be doing the opposite of multiplying or the opposite of distributing. We're going to go back to the factor form, essentially. So you're going to learn how to go from here to here. That's a skill. That's a huge skill, and I pray that you can learn. And you'll keep seeing it over and over again. So in order to do that, you have to know, is this a difference of squares? So what does difference mean in that? So it has to have a minus sign in between if it is a difference of squares. And it has to have perfect squares, meaning like if I take the square root of it, I get whole terms. So for example, we did a few yesterday. Let's do like number 4 together, right? First, check if it's a difference of squares. So I do have a minus sign in the middle. And let's see, is c squared a perfect square? What's the square root of it? What? No. So what's the opposite of squaring something? What? Of squaring something. Opposite of squaring. No. So like if I square 12, meaning like what's 12 squared, class? 144. What would be the opposite? Like what would I do to the 144 to get back to the 12? It's not a division sign, it's a square root symbol. So know that now. Opposite of squaring something is to take the square root of it. So if I have a variable squared, and then I take the square root of it, they cancel each other out. That's like timesing something by 2 and then dividing it by 2. They cancel each other out. So when that happens, my square root of that is just c. Cancel each other out. So that's a perfect square. C squared is. What about 100? Is that a perfect square? All right, well, if you're not sure, here's how you can tell. And I'll show you on Desmos because we don't have any more assessments this year that you won't have access to Desmos with, unless we change that rule in a second. But, so graphing calculator, most calculators, all calculators, have a square root symbol. It looks like that. So if you press this little keyboard, You can press this and it'll give you the square root symbol. I like just typing SQRT and then it gives me the square root symbol. Whatever you feel like. Type the number you want to take the square root of, and then if it gives me a whole number, then it's a perfect square. If it doesn't, so like 10 is not a perfect square because it gives me a decimal. All right, so whatever number you're trying to figure out is a perfect square, type it in under the square root symbol. Questions on that? All right, so since there's a minus sign in between and there's perfect squares on each side, we can factor it according to this rule. So which basically says if it's a difference of squares, write it as the square roots in parentheses. So the square root of c squared is c. The square root of 100 is what, class? And do it one with a plus and then another with a minus. All right, if you were here the past 2 days in algebra, you would have known that anytime you square root something, you technically have two answers. The positive version and the negative version. Because if I do the square root, or if I do -2 squared, I also get a +4. So that's why you factor it like this. And then you're done. I could check my work by distributing. What I should get is the original problem. So questions on that? Okay. Let's try one more together and I'll give you a couple to try on your own. Which one do you think looks the hardest from 6 through 10? And so which one was the most difficult from 6 through 10? Number 10? 8. Okay, I heard 10 first. So we'll do 10 and then maybe I'll have you try it. All right, so number 10. First, you need to confirm, is it a difference of squares? Does it have a minus sign in between? And are there perfect squares on each side of the minus sign? Yes, because what's the square root of x squared? Just x, good. So if you follow that rule that you were given, so I'll rewrite the rule if that helps you. Then you just write it in this format where A and B are the square roots. So then I'm just kind of constructing it right now. One of them's going to be plus, the other one's going to be minus. Now I just need the square root of 81y squared. So what's the square root of 81? 9. And what's the square root of y squared? This one. So 9y is the square root of 81y squared. So take the square root of the number, the coefficient normally. Don't put the minus sign in the calculator because it'll give you the wrong answer. And then the variables, you'll just have to know what's the opposite of squaring, square rooting, they cancel each other. Okay. Okay. I'll give you 2 to try. You can try number 8 and number 11. Okay. Tiara, what'd you get for number 8? Okay, so does that mean you think it's prime? Do you think it's not a different square? Okay, so let's see. Again, you guys always say that, but I don't know if you guys truly like needed help or if you just didn't have? Because you would have asked me prior to us going over it, if you really needed help. All right, so is it a difference of squares? So is there a minus sign in between, class? So that's a good sign. So two terms will be your difference of squares also. So it's a two-term expression with a minus sign in between. See if each one has its own perfect square. So is 25x squared a perfect square? What's the square root of 25, class? 5 was the square root of x squared. So that's good. I'll set it up according to that rule. Here's the rule again. Both going to be in parentheses. One with a plus, one with a minus, like that. What about the 49? Is that a perfect square? What is the square root of 49? So then put it in there. Double check, make sure you followed the rule, and you're done. Peyton? It does not matter if you put the minus first or the plus first. So you could write it like this if you want, because with multiplication, the order doesn't matter. So you could have like one parentheses before the other. Any other questions? Okay, so then I'm gonna pick on you. So did you get, so since I showed you how to do number 8, can you tell me, is 11 a difference of squares? Yes or no? No. Why do you think it's not? Okay, well then, gotta pay attention. Does it have a minus in between? So that covers the difference part. Are these perfect squares on each side? Okay, what's the square root of 4? And then of h squared? Class? H. Whatever letter it is. It could be a w squared. If I take the square root of it, it'll be what? If it's a m squared, if I take the square root of it, it'll be whatever letter. If it's squared and you take the square root, it's just that letter. Okay, so that's what we have so far. Good. Let's see, Zarel, is the 25d squared a perfect square? Why do you think it's not? What part of it is not a perfect square? You know how to put it in your calculator, the square root button? That's the yes or no question. Okay, can you put square root of 25 in your calculator and see if it gives you a whole number or not? Yeah. Yes. I give you guys time to try stuff. Would ideally be the time to try, but if I have to make you by putting you on the spot, then that's what we have to do.
5.
Yes, it is 5. But do practice it. I want to see it before we leave today of you putting numbers in the calculator and seeing if it's a perfect square or not. All right, so according to the rule, one of them has to be plus and one of them has to be minus. That's why I have a plus here and a minus here. What's the square root of g squared? Okay, good. And that's it. That's all you do. You have to determine, is it a difference of squares? Yes, it is. Let me apply this rule to it. So you have to find the square root of each and put it together like that. Question? Okay. Now it's gonna get a little bit more difficult. All right. So like, what about number 14 or maybe 16, since that one you can see better on my screen? That one's a little bit harder because I've not told you like how to take the square root of something like x to the 4th power, or x to the 6th power, or something like that. But it's pretty easy. First, see if it's a difference of squares, so it has a minus sign, that's a good sign. See if the rest of them are perfect squares. As long as the exponent on a variable is even, it is a perfect square. You just kind of have to figure out how many sets of it you have. So let's start with the 49. What's the square root of 49? Don't tell me, Zarel, what's the square root of 49? Okay, good. And then the m to the 4th, so that's m times m times m times m. If I take the square root of that, I'm really looking for like fair. Right, because squaring something is timesing it by itself, like the 1 time. Will this happen 2 times? So the square root of m to the 4th is gonna be m to the 2nd, good. Also, because m squared times m squared is m to the 4th, is it not? It is. So that's why it's a perfect square. Is 16 a perfect square? What's the square root of that? So then put in one of the parentheses +4, in the other one -4, and then that's it. If I wanted to check my answer, I usually don't check it every time, but if I was taking a test, I for sure would. If I wanted to check my answer, how could I? I could multiply it out, and then if I get the original problem, then I know I did it right. All right. I want you guys to try 19 for a second. Only one I'll make you try right now. That one has a variable to the 6th power, so we'll see if you can figure out that one. Okay, is 19 a difference of squares? Oh, yeah. So does it have a minus sign in between? Yes. And then we check to see if these are each perfect squares. So what's the square root of 121? Okay, so I'm gonna set up according to my rule is how you write it. If it's a squared minus b squared, you do a plus b in parentheses and then a minus b. Okay, so we did the square root of 121. What's the square root of r to the 6th power? R to the 3rd power. Good. So if you like that visual from earlier, I could do it again just with 6 r's this time. And then you're looking for pairs because squaring is timesing it by itself, like the 2 times. So in total, I have 3 groups, so I have 3. If you want to make it easier, you could think what's 6 divided by 2. And that also gives you the thing. All right, because r cubed, if you square it, the power rule, you times it, you get r to the 6th. All right, anyway. So there's that. Put the plus in one of them, put the minus in the other. What's the square root of 1? 1. Question, comment, concern. Okay. I would show you some with GCF, but I feel like I'll just wait a little bit. So based on what we covered, you should be able to do, let me figure out which numbers on your practice. And I'll just make you do evens or odds. But based on what I showed you, you should be able to do 1 through 12. Okay, 13 through 24, you need the rest of the notes for, but instead of going at this for 40 minutes straight, we'll kind of break it up that way. So do 1 through 12 on your practice, evens or odds, your choice. So that's 6 problems total. I don't think that's a huge task. And then I'll give you the answers and then we'll keep going. Yes. You should be. Yes, but just correct first. So like I'll answer questions about why it's a certain answer. Oops, I went way too far. Hang on. All right, so take a good look. I will answer your questions about why it's a certain answer in a second. But just correct for right now. The only other way that these could be written, like, and it still be right, is with the minus and plus sign in a different order. That's it. I suppose you could also do it like for the first one, 6 plus x and 6 minus x. But why you would do that, I don't really know, but it is still like same thing. So you should really only be correcting the 6, or unless you did them all. All right, now what questions do we have? So why is number 4 prime? Because it's not a difference of squares. Good. It's not a difference. It's a sum of squares. So that's why. Prime means that it's not factorable, that you can't split it up in any sort of way, that it is something you can multiply and get that. So there's no way. So that's why we put prime there. It's not a difference of squares. So for it to be a difference of squares, it has to be minus signs between the two terms. And then on each side of the minus sign has to be a perfect square. The Desmos can't do square roots of variables for you, but what they can do is square roots of any number you're not sure of. So like square root of 64 will tell you it's 8. You have to know that the square root of n squared is n based on your exponent rules. So like also that the square root of b to the 4th is b squared. So when you multiply them, then you get b to the 4th. Right, so you should always be able to check your answers by multiplying them out. Second? All right, I expected there to be an example of this, but I didn't see one, so I'll just kind of tweak an example. What if I get something like this? So instead of squared, it's cubed. Is this still a difference of squares? No, because I can't take the square root of y cubed and get like a whole number. Okay, so if this was my problem that I was given, then I would put prime, because I can't take the square root of y cubed and get something. So good, any questions? All right, next week, I will show you how to look for the GCF first, which we have done GCF before, but I didn't think we really had time today to go over it. So, examples with GCF, this portion of your notes is what we'll cover on Monday and do the rest of the practice on Monday, and that'll go in as a different practice score. So any questions? All right, I'm not going to start something brand new with like 4 minutes left, so we'll just end it there.